This is Kurtop with you, and these are the 100 strangest excavations after which scientists had to apologize. The first mammoth that might come back. The permafrost of Yakutia preserved the body of a mammoth as if it had just been taken out of a refrigerator. Yucca is not just a mummified corpse. It has a preserved brain, soft tissues, glands, and most importantly, living cell nuclei. Scientists have already conducted the first experiments. They implanted the nuclei into a mouse cell, and it showed signs of activity. There hasn't been any cell division yet, but this is just the beginning. Cloning is being seriously discussed. If the technology succeeds, the mammoth could become the first species to return from extinction. It sounds like science fiction, but it's no longer fiction. This is a working laboratory. A visitor from ancient Egypt. In the rock-cut tomb of Per, archaeologists found something completely unexpected here. A tiny Phaeons Patikos, the Egyptian protector god, guardian of the path to the afterlife. It was lying among beads, amulets, and the remains of 14 buried individuals. This is a rarity for Anatolia. In the publications of the Adiyaman Museum, this find is called the first one recorded here. It's immediately clear this isn't just a pretty trinket, but a functional talisman placed there on purpose. In Egypt, the Patikos holds back evil, wards off diseases and bites, and accompanies people through dangerous passages. If such an amulet ended up in a Hellenistic tomb in Commagene, it means the family accepted Egyptian protection as part of their ritual. Peri was located at the crossroads of Anatolia, Mesopotamia, and the Mediterranean. This explains the trade connections and rapid migration of ideas, but trade alone can't explain it. An alien symbol was incorporated into the local set of wires for the deceased, along with the usual beads and pendants. What caught my attention here was specifically the word alien. The Egyptian amulet doesn't conflict with the Anatolian form of burial. Instead, it completes it, creating a sense of a collected set of protections. The small figurine shows how easily ancient societies incorporated useful foreign symbols into their beliefs. It's heading to the moon. The longer they observed Triae Atlas, the stronger the feeling grew that its trajectory was heading too confidently toward the moon. Skeptics explained this with simple geometry. They said that most interstellar objects cross the plane of the ecliptic, but calculations that appeared later revealed a much more unpleasant detail. The object isn't just flying by, it's slowing down, and it's doing this exactly where a normal comet should actually be speeding up under the influence of gravity. At that moment, the old discussion about how natural the moon itself is resurfaced. Over the decades, too many oddities have accumulated. A perfectly round shape, synchronous rotation without the slightest deviation, an incredible crust density, and those very seismic signals that make the lunar surface ring like a metallic shell. These anomalies are usually listed separately, without trying to form a bigger picture. But when an interstellar object starts behaving as if it's choosing the moon as its final destination, all these details stop looking like coincidences. Scientists cautiously stated that Triae Atlas shows signs of controlled deceleration. Ufologists put it more simply, it's heading to where something already exists. And the old theory that the moon might be an ancient mechanism or even an artificial body suddenly stopped sounding like science fiction. If everything we're observing really isn't a coincidence, then the logic is simple. The ship is flying to a specifically designated point. Ritual rice. In the northern Rhytidian cave, archaeologists found rice husk imprints on ceramics that are at least 3,500 years old. The only traces are a thin starch film and phytoliths, but that's enough to confirm that the settlers reached Guam carrying rice across 2,300 kilometers of open ocean. No fields, terraces, or sickles have ever been found. This means the grains were preserved not for meals, but for rituals, perhaps once a year, to remind the spirits of their ancestors about their distant home in Taiwan. In the hands of the islanders, rice turned from everyday food into a symbol of origin. And that's why the tiny traces on the pottery turned out to be more important than an entire cemetery of bone harpoons. Picasso's dish, an ordinary secondhand store in Belgium. A shelf with dishes, dusty plates, cups, old glassware, and suddenly a ceramic dish, not particularly beautiful. It looks handmade, and on the back there's an inscription, Imprento Original de Picasso. At first, they thought it was a joke or a replica, but decided to check, and the examination confirmed it was an original, an authentic work by Pablo Picasso from 1953, of these serial but still rare ceramic prints he made in France. How it ended up in a secondhand shop is unknown. Maybe it was lost, forgotten, or thrown away. Maybe someone didn't know what they were holding or knew but didn't care anymore. The plate was sold at auction for 12,600 euros, but the amount isn't the main thing. The main thing is the effect. It's like finding an autograph in an old textbook or the original of a letter in a box of scrap paper. Such discoveries are always surprising because they shatter the main myth that value is found where it's expected. Sometimes art sits on a shelf among trash, waiting for decades until someone takes a closer look. The comet is older than the sun. The interstellar object 3I asteroid terrestrial impact last alert system was discovered quite recently, but in fact, it is older than everything we are used to considering ancient in the solar system. Observations from the James Webb Telescope showed that its surface is as if cemented by cosmic rays. The ice and rocks are saturated with radiation to a depth of up to 20 meters, forming a thick crust that behaves like ordinary comet soil. Scientists estimated how much carbon dioxide the nucleus emits, and based on this consumption, they determined the travel age, about 7 billion years. That means the object set out when neither the Earth nor the Sun even existed yet. It turns out to be a strange picture, a body born in another star system, rushing through interstellar space for billions of years, surviving bombardment by radiation, preserving its internal gas reserves, and only now accidentally getting caught by our solar system. Skeptics focus on the word accidentally, while ufologists focus on too long, because for them, billions of years is not just time, but a period during which any natural trajectory can be turned into a very deliberate one. They decided to melt down the ancient artifact. A gold bracelet from the era of Amenemope, the 21st dynasty, around 1000 before Christ, disappeared from the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. This is a rare piece with spherical beads made of lapis lazuli. According to the Ministry of Antiquities, the bracelet vanished from the restoration lab. The authorities referred the case to the police. A photo of the artifact was sent to all airports, ports, and land borders. A commission has been created to inspect and re-register all items that were kept in the laboratory. It is reported that the disappearance was noticed while preparing to send the artifacts to an exhibition in Rome. The Grand Egyptian Museum in Giza, featuring the treasures of Tutankhamun, will open soon. Losing a valuable item like a royal bracelet affects both security and the collection's protection system's reputation. Lapis lazuli in Egypt symbolized power and protection, an ironic detail for an item that was supposed to be under the best protection. There is an opinion that this artifact has already been melted down and sold as ordinary scrap. Siberian blacksmith. The Krasnoyarsk excavation Pinchuga 6 at first looked like just another standard Hunu burial mound field. Everything changed when a buckle with a neatly welded loop was taken out of the burial lens. Metallographic analysis showed that the connection was made with real welding. For the 3rd century AD, this is a technological breakthrough. Nearby lay miniature hammers, knife blanks, and a charred half of a forge, all in one grave, and the remains were cremated together with the tools. A classic burial rite for a craftsman, who, according to beliefs, will need his forge in the afterlife. At that time in Siberia, such welded seams were unprecedented. The seam's iron and phosphorus composition matches Xiongnu steppe blacksmiths, though the technique likely originated further south. So the technique arrived in transit through the Altai-Yenisei trade corridor, got stuck in an isolated settlement, and was preserved there. Secret spectra. It would seem that if we were dealing with just an exotic guest comet, scientists should be happy with every opened file, uploading data to archives and discussing it at conferences. This is partly the case, but the more closely you look at the history of 3I asteroid terrestrial impact last alert systems approach, the more strange locks and restricted access labels you find. In European databases, you can see that almost all spectral observations of this object are closed until April 2026. This could still be explained by the fact that teams want to calmly process the data. But next to it appears one special file, access to which is blocked until January 1st, 2099. 74 years of silence for a single data packet about an ordinary comet. That's a period comparable to the classification of military archives. No official explanations are given. The protocols contain only dry project numbers and references to internal agreements. In such an atmosphere, even the calmest person can't help but wonder, what exactly did they see in the spectra of the interstellar object? If only people who haven't even been born yet will be allowed to discuss it. A mineral that no longer exists. This stone weighs only 1.6 carats, but its price is literally beyond estimation. Kayatuit is the rarest mineral on Earth. It was discovered by chance in Myanmar, at an ordinary market. Scientists found that its composition and crystal lattice are not found anywhere else in nature, neither before nor since. The color is amber brown, and its structure is like that of an alien object. Under a microscope, there are hollow tubes inside, formed by pressure and time. Today, Kyotuit is kept in the Los Angeles Museum. This is not just a stone, it's a mistake of nature and possibly a trace of an ancient geological event that science doesn't even suspect yet. But what if this mineral is not just a coincidence of nature, but something deeper? What if its composition holds answers to questions we haven't even asked yet? A lucky amulet. Sometimes archaeology uncovers not just an artifact, but a character. For example, recently in Britain, at the site of an ancient settlement from the Roman Empire era, archaeologists unearthed a bronze figurine. Small, rough, almost primitive. At first glance, it's just a piece of metal, but the shape is instantly recognizable. It's a phallus, just an ordinary Roman amulet. While it might seem funny today, it was once seen as powerful protection. People wore such pendants around their necks, attached them to belts, fastened them to carriages, and even hung them over children's cribs. The phallus wasn't considered vulgar. It was a talisman, a symbol of strength, life, luck, protection from the evil eye, and all things bad. The find is small, no gold, no carvings, no inscriptions, just bronze worn smooth by time. But that's where its strength lies, because the amulet was clearly used. Someone wore it, fiddled with it in their hands, maybe even lost it. Maybe it belonged to a soldier, a merchant, or a child. Someone believed that this little thing would keep misfortune away. And now, 2,000 years later, it's back in the light. Did it work? Who knows? It outlived its owner, the empire, the era, everything except its shape. A maneuver in the void. Even if you forget about the classified archives, the trajectory of the Tri-AI Atlas itself looks as if it was drawn by a passionate navigator. In the report by National Aeronautics and Space Administration, is Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the non-gravitational acceleration of the object as it approached the sun is described carefully, almost shyly in its wording. The radial acceleration directed away from the star and the transverse acceleration perpendicular to this line do not fit the smooth ballistics of a stone in a gravitational well. Formally, this can be attributed to the reactive thrust from gases. Ice evaporates, jets eject dust, and the core gives itself a slight push. The problem is that this push turned out to be too precise, too steady, and occurred at a distance of hundreds of millions of kilometers from the sun, where comets usually still behave sluggishly. The Sailor's Stone. On the Hindhead Heath in Surrey, near the natural amphitheater called the Devil's Punch Bowl, there stands an old gravestone. There is no name on it. This is a monument to an unknown sailor, killed in September of 1786 on the hillside. Not everyone knows the story, but it has been recorded in detail. The sailor was traveling from London to his ship in Portsmouth. He stopped at the Red Lion Inn in Thursley, met 3 sailors, James Marshall, Michael Casey, and Edward Lonigan, and left with them towards Hindhead. Then came the robbery and murder. The body was thrown into a ravine, the head almost severed. The criminals were quickly identified. They tried to sell the sailors' belongings at the Sun Tavern in Rake. 6 months later, they were tried in Kingston, and on April 7, 1787 were hanged on a triple gallows at the scene of the crime. It was a typical public execution for that time, meant as an example to others. The identity of the victim remains unknown. Sometimes the name Edward Hardman, born in 1752 in London, is mentioned, but there is no evidence. The locals raised money for a plaque and set up a monument. The sailor's grave itself is in the local cemetery, but the headstone was left by the roadside so that travelers would remember the story. The story often appears in local history and 19th century literature. The place has become a local legend, Minoan Grill. In the display case of the Museum of Prehistoric Thera, there is what looks like an ordinary grill for kebabs, but it is over 3,000 years old. The stone blocks of the Minoans from Santorini look like a miniature relief of a fortress wall. On the sides there are bullheads, on top there are slots for skewers, and below there is a neat row of round holes. Air would flow through them, fanning the coals and turning this portable structure into a true Bronze Age turbo grill. Imagine sailors in the port of Akrotiri tossing pieces of goat meat onto these stone pans, while the aroma of smoke drifts through the streets that are now hidden beneath the ash of the eruption. Scientists have long debated why the Minoans needed such mobility. Was it for a banquet, on a ship, street trading, or a ritual feast where the offering was shared right at the sanctuary? Whichever theory turns out to be correct, the technology works flawlessly. The air starts beneath the coals, passes through a line of holes, and heats the stone evenly. Modern chefs do the same thing when they place a fan next to the grill. Every time we take a bite of hot meat on the Aegean coast, we're repeating a recipe that the Minoans perfected long before the Trojan War. Strange rays. When Tri-AI Atlas flew past the sun, it was photographed by dozens of observatories, and in one of the pictures, something happened that literally made astronomers fall silent. Two long, thin rays extended from the comet, like light tails stretched into perfect lines. They stretched over a huge distance, but remained sharp and straight, as if someone had drawn them with a laser. This no longer looked like ordinary dust or gas. Real comets always have tails that spread out, bend, and change because of wind and rotation. But here, on the contrary, there was complete stability, as if the object was deliberately maintaining its shape. One of the scientists said, almost in a whisper, "We're seeing something for the first time that looks too precise." Even the skeptics admitted, such behavior is not typical for comets. There is no official explanation yet, but after this very image, even the most cautious scientists started saying, Tri-AI Atlas is behaving as if it's waiting for someone, and this isn't the first time it's done so. 100 years underground. In the Czech Republic, archaeologists found a unique treasure that's only about 100 years old, not ancient. A gold treasure was discovered in a village, hidden since the early 20th century. Some coins and jewelry are clearly from a later period, not the Middle Ages. The treasure was found in an old building that once belonged to a family engaged in trade. When the First World War began, their business collapsed, and the money was apparently hidden to wait out the hard times. But they never returned, leaving their treasure in an inaccessible place. Part of the gold, apparently, was collected from several sources: coins from different countries, jewelry, rare metals. This treasure is interesting not only because of its value, but also because of the story behind it. It reminds us how people try to preserve their wealth when the world around them is falling apart. Many of these items are now on display in museums, and the treasure has become a symbol of lost hopes and destinies. King or demon? A strange artifact is kept in the Museum of Arms and Armor in Leeds. It was clearly not made for battle. It has horns, a toothy grin, and a bristly chin. It doesn't look like a warrior's helmet, but rather a jester's mask. But according to the documents, this helmet belonged to Henry VIII. Yes, that very one of the most powerful and controversial monarchs of England. The helmet belonged to a suit of armor given by Emperor Maximilian I to honor the military alliance. It was crafted by the renowned armorer Susenhofer, and the engraving was done by a jeweler from Augsburg. So this is not about any kind of farce. This was an official gift, custom-made with the highest level of craftsmanship. Why would the king want such a face? There are many theories, ranging from a theatrical ceremonial image to esoteric symbolism. Maybe it's an allegory, a demon that power turned into, or maybe just a specific sense of humor. But what's interesting is that the entire set of armor disappeared, and only this helmet remained. And perhaps it was precisely because of its mysterious and frightening appearance that it survived through the centuries. The first signal. On October 24th, the MEERKAT radio telescope in South Africa picked up something that had previously been unsuccessfully attempted to be heard. At frequencies of 1,665 and 1,667 megahertz, a dip appeared. A weak absorption occurs when a radio wave passes through a cloud of cold gas. Usually this is detected with ordinary comets, but here, everything was stranger. The signal appeared briefly and vanished just as quickly, like someone flicking a flashlight on and off for a second. Scientists attributed this to the radio wave interacting with the shell material. But there's a nuance. The object predates the sun. Its surface should have burned out over billions of years, and gas emissions should now be extremely weak. However, instead of that, Tree Eye Atlas showed activity precisely at the moment it passed a certain point in its trajectory, as if it was reacting to something external. This short signal doesn't resemble a transmission or a code. It's too weak and too fragmented. But in the history of observing interstellar objects, nothing like this has ever happened before. If a comet stays silent its whole life and then suddenly responds just once, especially at the moment when a shock wave from a solar flare passes nearby, you can't help but think, we're dealing with something that can change its state, not just evaporate under the rays of a star. Scientists cautiously talk about unusual gas activity, but more and more people notice that Tree Eye Atlas behaves as if it's not just flying, it's responding. Lard from the World War II era. For decades after strong storms, the sea has periodically washed up pork lard on the shore of St. Cyrus in Scotland, which ended up in the sea due to a shipwreck during the World War II. Recently, the waves washed ashore 4 more pieces of lard, each of which retained the shape of the barrels in which they were probably stored all these years. These unusual relics became known to the locals after the cargo ship carrying the lard was sunk by bombs. It is believed that with each new storm, the sunken ship gradually releases part of its cargo, washing fatty blocks ashore. The locals are familiar with this phenomenon and claim that the lard, despite being covered with a crust of shells, has been well preserved and is suitable for use. During the war, when access to lard was limited, such finds became real treasures, helping people get through difficult times. Mycenaean gold. In 2004, archaeologists opened an untouched Tholos tomb at Kazanaki near Volos, a rare chance to see a Mycenaean luxury set in its original form. On the stone floor lay 7 burials, and scattered among them were 165 gold items, tiny discs, tubes, embossed beads, and weapon parts. Many of the plates were fractions of a millimeter thick. From 10 grams of metal, craftsmen hammered out 200 mini-sun discs and sewed them onto fabric, turning the shroud into a reflective armor. The ornaments have a single trait, their extreme fragility. The gold contains minimal copper for shine, and the edges are intentionally left unreinforced. Such attire was not worn in life. It was created for a single occasion, the funeral ceremony. Complex items like rings and dagger hilts demonstrate the opposite approach. There, gold is just a thin shell. The base was made of bronze or a wooden core, covered with foil, and the joints were masked with granulation and cloisonné enamel. In this way, the luxury is preserved visually, while the metal is saved physically. This discovery revealed one of the main rules of the Late Bronze Age. Gold was not just a currency, but a shorthand for power. The thinner the sheet, the louder the visual effect, and the clearer the message to descendants. Our family could afford to shine, even if there weren't really enough resources for it. Unidentified flying object over Moscow. October 27th. The morning over Moscow began with a phenomenon that too many people saw at the same time to write it off as an optical illusion. A bright object flew over several towns near Moscow: Ramenskoye, Friazino, Krasnogorsk, and Lubertsy. It didn't move like a meteor, it didn't leave a typical trail, and it disappeared just as suddenly as it appeared, as if cutting a short streak of light out of the sky. In the first few hours, no one explained anything. Usually, meteorites are identified faster than the first video appears on social media. Here, there was silence. And right at that moment, a strange coincidence happened. National Aeronautics and Space Administration removed data about the asteroid 2025 United States 6 from its website, which was supposed to approach Earth during those days. If it wasn't that one, why remove the information? The Chinese satellite theory was quickly disproved. The object's shape and trajectory didn't match space debris lists. Attention then turned to the Russian Academy of Sciences. 5 days after the incident, the academicians reported that the object had broken into pieces and fallen in the Novgorod and Tver regions. But even this version sounded unusual. They called it a bright iron or ironstone bolide, although the flashes described by eyewitnesses are not typical for such a composition. Most importantly, they again mentioned its orbit's unusual features. If it really was a bolide, then why did the National Aeronautics and Space Administration data disappear? Why did the report appear only a few days later? And why did no one report the explosions in the Novgorod region, which should have been heard by dozens of settlements? Ufologists put forward a direct theory. A part of the craft could have made an emergency landing. It's possible it was being tracked in advance, including by National Aeronautics and Space Administration. And if that's the case, it's no surprise that the information was quickly removed and the crash site was sealed off. There are no official answers, but the combination of a bright object with an unusual trajectory, deleted data, delayed comments, and two regions where it fell seems too strange not to pay attention to. The gates through which death passed. On the southwestern coast of Sicily, archaeologists have uncovered not just ruins, but an entirely forgotten fragment of an ancient city. 3-meter-high walls, gates, cemeteries, workshops, all of this belonged to the ancient Greek city of Selinunte. Recently, the northern gate was found, which processions used en route to the necropolises. They led to 5,000 burials, from simple graves to rich tombs, and all of this stood on the most vulnerable border of the city. Apparently, ritual and vulnerability were connected. According to Diodorus Siculus, it was from here that the Carthaginian troops broke into the city. The battle lasted 10 days, and 16,000 defenders of Selinunte died. The battlefield is right here under our feet, and nearby is the cemetery where they may have been buried. It's amazing how much has been preserved. Ovens, fragments of ceramics, remains of workshops, and wine storage facilities. By the scale and density of the finds, it becomes clear the city lived, traded, ritualized death, and suffered. And now, 2,500 years later, it is slowly coming back to the surface. A portrait of a Viking. In the collection of the National Museum of Denmark, a miniature figurine made of walrus tusk, which was found back in 1796 in a burial mound in Norway, has been re-examined. The height is about 3 centimeters, and it dates back to the second half of the 10th century. This is probably a king from the game Hanifa Tafel, the predecessor of chess. But the main thing is in the details. A straight parting, neat sideburns, a mustache raised above the lip, a goatee trimmed in the Spanish style and gathered into a single braid. Such detailed craftsmanship is rare for Viking archaeology. Here you can see exactly how they wore their hair and beard. Curator Peter Pence calls the item as close to a portrait as we can possibly get. The hair and beard are shown from all sides, not schematically, but with fine styling details. Similar figures usually maintain attention to the beard, a sign of masculine strength and status, well understood from the sagas. The hands of this specimen are damaged, but the composition is still clear. In other words, this is not an abstract warrior, but a specific image of a ruler, recognizable by his hairstyle and beard. The material also says a lot. Walrus ivory, a northern resource, was traded to workshops where skilled craftsmen used advanced carving and lacquering techniques. And the choice of subject reflects the value of power and appearance in public representation. Stone sarcophagus. In Italy, archaeologists have discovered an untouched sarcophagus that is 2,500 years old, which had remained hidden underground near the volcanic Lake Bolsena. During excavations of the ancient Etruscan settlement of Byzantio on the shore of the lake, several graves were found, dating from between the 7th and 5th centuries before Christ. To the scientists' surprise, none of the burials had been looted, which is rare for such an ancient site. A particular interest was aroused by a simple stone sarcophagus, which had preserved its contents in their original state. With the help of an excavator, the archaeologists lifted the heavy lid and found an almost completely preserved skeleton inside. Next to the remains was a small clay vessel, which, according to experts, could symbolize personal belongings or an offering to the deceased. The find is unique and gives researchers a rare opportunity to study the remains of an ancient Etruscan. Scientists hope that further analysis of the skeleton will provide valuable information about the life and culture of this people. Unknown material of the moon. When China brought back the first ever samples from the far side of the moon, scientists expected to see ordinary regolith fused by meteorite impacts. Of the 5,000 fragments, 7 samples completely changed the scientists' usual understanding. They contained too much olivine, a mineral typical for meteorites but not for lunar rock. Chemical analysis showed that these fragments do not match any known type of lunar minerals at all. Comparison of the isotopes of iron, manganese, nickel, and silicon gave an unexpected result. The substance is identical to carbonaceous chondrite Ivuna-type chondrites, the most water-rich and rarest meteorites in the solar system. On Earth, almost none of these are preserved. They are porous, fragile, and soft, and cannot survive entry into the atmosphere. On the Moon, it's a different story. Without air and without deceleration, they fly at full speed, melt, and instantly solidify, preserving their structure. These 7 fragments are the first confirmed case in history when carbonaceous chondrite Ivuna-type chondrites were found on the Moon in an unaltered state. And most importantly, there turned out to be much more of them than expected. According to estimates, up to a third of all meteorites that have ever fallen on the Moon could belong to this type. This is not just a rarity anymore, it's evidence of a massive bombardment that took place when the Earth and the Moon were just forming. But the most interesting thing is something else. Carbonaceous chondrite. Ivuna-type chondrites are the main candidates for being the carriers of water and organics in the early solar system. And if there are so many of them on the Moon, it means that part of this history is recorded right there. Not on Earth, where tectonics and the atmosphere erase everything, but on the satellite's far side, which has acted as an archive for billions of years. The irony is that while we argue about whether the Moon is artificial or not, it was the Moon itself that first provided material that doesn't fit the usual models of the origin of water and possibly even life itself. The mystery of the plush swan. Archaeologists suggest that the felt swan figurine created in the Iron Age symbolized life. This artifact, known as the Pazyryk swan, was made from deer felt and stuffed with deer wool. The figurine belongs to the Pazyryk culture associated with the nomadic peoples of the Saka group, which was considered the eastern branch of the Scythians. The swan is estimated to be 2,400 years old. It was found in the Pazyryk Valley in the Altai Mountains, near the borders of Russia, Kazakhstan, China, and Mongolia. The figurine is about 30 centimeters tall. The body of the swan was made of white felt, the eyes and wingtips were made of black felt, and the legs were made of a reddish-brown material. To make the swan stand upright, wooden sticks were inserted into its legs. It is believed that the figurine could have been mounted on a chariot or on a structure resembling a tent, which eventually deteriorated over time. The swan probably symbolized life in 3 realms: in the air, on land, and in water. Researchers note that images of waterfowl, such as swans and ducks, are often found in creation myths among ancient peoples. Excavations in Pazyryk began back in the 1920s, but the swan figurine was only found in 1949. The unique preservation of this and other organic objects is explained by the peculiarities of the local climate. Many burial mounds are located in the permafrost zone, which allows artifacts to remain virtually untouched for centuries. A book with human hair. When you hear the phrase "a book made of human hair," the first thing that comes to mind is fiction, something out of cheap horror, but then you see a photo and you stop being surprised. These books really do exist. France, 14th to 15th century. Medieval monasteries where manuscripts were bound into booklets, sewn from something that at first seems like leather, but then you realize it's hair. Real, long, light-colored human hair. For a long time, scientists couldn't explain why this was necessary at all. Only recently have more or less clear hypotheses appeared. It turned out that the hair didn't just end up there by accident. It was sewn in deliberately as a material, as a symbol. Possibly these were reliquaries, personal items. People would leave a lock of hair in a book to remember the deceased as a vow, for repentance, or for protection, since hair was thought to carry the soul. In one case, a prayer book contained not just a single lock of hair, but an entire layer, tightly sewn between the pages with the text. And for someone, this book could have been the only connection with the deceased person or with themselves. And now imagine, you're in a library, you pull out an old volume, and it's alive not in a figurative sense, but truly alive, when knowledge and memory are bound not with ink, but with a person. Indigo to Rome. In the Dzudzuana cave in the Caucasus, a thin blue coating was found on the working edges of stone tools. Analysis revealed the chromophore indigotin. The complex is about 34,000 years old. The particles are concentrated where the tool is more worn, and starch grains are found nearby. Researchers from Ca Foscari see this not as an accidental trace of soil, but as intentional processing of plants not meant for food. Such raw materials are used to obtain dyes, infusions, and mordants. They are used to fix color on fibers and leather, treat threads and ropes, and test medicinal effects. These technologies usually disappear without a trace. Organic matter decays, leaving only microparticles on stone. Dzudzwana provides exactly this kind of imprint and shows that the experiment was deliberate and repeatable. We are used to telling the story of the Paleolithic with flint and bones. This blue brings plants and the simple chemistry of hands back to the center of daily life. Leaves were crushed, allowed to oxidize, and worked until a stable color was achieved, long before Rome and medieval workshops. The purpose is still debated, but one thing is clear: the origins of indigo go much deeper than we thought. Signals on old photographic plates. Sometimes the future hides not in new telescopes, but in old boxes of archives. In the United States, they recently rephotographed sky plates from the 1950s old observatory series, taken long before the digital era. And on these images, they noticed strange flashes, small bright dots that appear only in one frame and disappear in the next. Astronomers call such objects transients. Usually it's a defect or a rare cosmic ray flash. But here, a sequence began that can no longer be called a coincidence. Scientists compared the dates when these dots appeared with the nuclear test calendar, and it turned out that the probability of such a flash increased by almost 45% within a day after the explosion. That is, the sky was reacting literally, and not to the light of the explosion, which could have been reflected a day later, but by the appearance of unknown objects that were recorded on photographic plates as fast, single-frame impulses. And it gets even stranger. The researchers checked what was happening with unidentified flying object reports on those days and found that the more reports appeared in the press, the more transients showed up in the photos. It was as if two independent systems, human eyes and old cameras, were recording the same phenomenon, but from different perspectives, as if something was reacting to the nuclear tests. The transients were not atmospheric flashes. Their spectra did not match plasma or the light from heated air. They were not defects on the plates. Coincidences between different observatories can't be explained by the chemistry of the emulsion, and they weren't satellites. In the 1950s, there simply weren't enough of them, and the orbits of the first spacecraft are known down to the second. As a result, the researchers ended up with strange statistics. Every time someone detonated something on Earth, the sky responded. No one knows exactly what appeared over the test site on those days. But now, when we see that there is an object flying near Earth that reacts to solar flares, changes its trajectory, and shows strange signals, these archival shots no longer look like museum exhibits. A story that isn't in the textbooks. Not so long ago, archaeologists found evidence that in ancient Troy, long before the Iliad was written, people were already drinking wine. This is not just a theory or a guess, but real chemical evidence that confirmed that even ordinary people in the territory of Troy not only drank wine, but also used it in their everyday lives. For researchers, this was a sensation, since in ancient times usually only the elite could afford the luxury of drinking wine. But in Troy, it was available to all layers of society. Studies have shown that the cult of wine was so important to the inhabitants of Troy that the vessels in which it was drunk were found throughout the city, from wealthy palaces to simple residential quarters. But what's even more interesting is that the fermentation method used in Troy was so unique that it resembled those of more complex and advanced civilizations of that time. And now, thanks to these studies, we can confidently say that Troy was not just a legend, it was real, and its culture was much more complex and progressive than we could have imagined. A skeleton from different eras. In Belgium, archaeologists found an unusual skeleton made up of bones from 5 people who lived several thousand years apart. The remains were discovered at a Roman-era cremation cemetery in Pomerol, near the border with France. As it turned out, this strange individual is 2,500 years older than the Roman period. Moreover, radiocarbon analysis showed that the bones date back to the Neolithic period, that is, between the 7th and 3rd millennia before Christ. Excavations of this cemetery began back in the 1970s, And among the 76 cremation burials, scientists discovered an unusual burial, a skeleton in the fetal position. According to initial assumptions, it was Roman, since a Roman-type bone pin was found next to the skull. However, a detailed analysis in 2019 led to unexpected conclusions. The skeleton was assembled from bones belonging to different people, and the pin itself dates to approximately 69 to 210 AD. Scientists suggest that the Romans might have accidentally disturbed a Neolithic burial, adding the skull and the pin to complete the composition. However, it remains a mystery why and how the different remains ended up being assembled together. The glow above the volcano. When you live at the foot of an active volcano, it's hard to surprise you. Lava fountains, smoke, the trembling of the earth, all of this is part of the usual rhythm. But what eyewitnesses saw at one of Central America's active volcanoes doesn't fit into this rhythm at all. A bright glowing ring appeared in the night sky, perfectly even and closed, as if drawn with a compass. It hovered right above the crater, neither drifting nor breaking apart, staying at the same height. For anyone who has seen how smoke and fog behave around volcanoes, this is already strange. Hot air is constantly rising, and any cloud should have dispersed in seconds, but the object kept its shape as if something was holding it from the inside. It glowed with a soft white light, as if reflecting something external. But neither the moon nor any cities in that direction could have produced such an even glow. In the video, you can see that the ring seems to rotate not around its own axis, but as a solid structure responding to the movement of the camera. And this no longer looks like smoke, ash, or any rare atmospheric phenomenon. Local geologists checked the equipment. The sensors did not detect any electrical surges, magnetic pulses, or gas emissions that could have created such an effect. But at the same time, a few minutes before the object appeared, the volcano's activity suddenly decreased. The heat flow dropped, and the seismic tremors became steadier, as if something had calmed the system down. Such cases are recorded from time to time all over the world, but most often above volcanoes, craters, and faults. Most of these places are natural energy nodes of the planet. Hot spots where gases, radiation, and electricity rise up, and whatever it was, above the volcano it behaved as if it was studying the workings of the very heart of the Earth. There is no official conclusion. Meteorologists said it was an anomalous cloud. Eyewitnesses said it was not a cloud. The diver found an extremely rare treasure. Back in the distant year of 1715-11, ships left the port of Cuba and headed to Europe with treasures. However, a hurricane off the east coast of Florida sank the ships, and 1,500 sailors died. Gitschlag, his business partner Mike Penninger, as well as Nika Melio and Karina Leah, discovered more than 200 silver coins on the seafloor. The value of the find, depending on the condition of the coins, can range from $12,000 to $130,000. When exploring sunken ships, the team often finds ceramic and metal fragments, but coins are a real rarity. Silver coins can become corroded after hundreds of years in the water, but piastres are easy to recognize. The treasures were found among the wreckage of one of the two flagships. Gitschlag believes that the coins may have been minted in Mexico City. The treasure hasn't been appraised yet, but most will go to the museum, with only a small portion for sale. Bases that we saw with our own eyes. In the declassified CIA archives, there is a program with the beautiful name Stargate. Officially, it was the study of paranormal abilities. Unofficially, it was an attempt to look where neither satellites nor spies could reach. Test subjects with extrasensory perception were placed in a room, given an encrypted target, and asked to describe what they saw. There are strange coincidences in the reports. Several participants, independently of each other, spoke about bases not on Earth, but in Alaska, Africa, and on Titan, Saturn's moon. They described similar beings with large heads and pale skin, a room, equipment, and strange domes. Some see this as mere fantasy from the test subjects, while others view it as proof of dealing with something outside normal intelligence gathering. It's important to understand there's no scientific proof for these visions, which is exactly why the program was eventually shut down as unreliable. But another fact remains. The CIA spent decades investing money, time, and people in an attempt to reach foreign objects not with missiles, but with the mind. This means the issue of unidentified flying object S, impossible bases, was a serious concern long before it became a trend. And when those same agencies today say they have almost nothing to add to the unidentified flying object topic, it's strange to remember that there was a time when they seriously tried to look at possible alien bases with their eyes closed. Manuscript surprise. Imagine opening a medieval tome, expecting dusty prayers, but instead you get a full-blown attraction. Some pages flare up with huge initials, others are covered in Turonian notes, an ancient shorthand that only a couple of dozen specialists in the world can decipher today. Then you come across a spread where the letters form the shapes of constellations, as if the author decided to combine a school primer with the night sky. You turn the page and spot a tiny doodle in the corner. The scribe was testing his pen, quickly composing a mini medley of poems about birds. Half the space is taken up by wide margins. Why waste such expensive parchment? It turns out that emptiness here is not really emptiness. It was on these margins that medieval students filled in marginalia, and later those same margins saved books from mold. The humid air would start to damage the edges of the book, while the text remained untouched. There's also a completely unexpected format, the bat book. Such an almanac was worn hanging upside down from the belt, unfolded to its full length, and immediately provided a calendar, tables of lunar phases, and a list of saints for the whole year. The purple stains in the corners are scars from mold. The manuscript was once stored in damp conditions, and microbes managed to eat away at the pages. Now scientists are literally counting the fungal growth rings, like on an old tree. Just imagine how much information is hidden in these cosmetic defects. They use them to date the library's relocations and revise our understanding of that era's climate. It's exactly these visual Easter eggs that make a manuscript not just a collection of text, but a full-fledged quest. Every note, every unexpected insert is a direct portal to the people who wrote, read, and use this book centuries before us. The oldest human tooth. Scientists have announced a sensational discovery in Germany. Ancient fossilized teeth estimated to be almost 10 million years old, which, according to them, do not fit into the established chronology of human history. What is truly shocking is that one of these fossils resembles the teeth of the earliest human ancestors. However, until now, such teeth have only been found in Africa, not in Europe, and even then, the existing series of fossils is millions of years younger. The two well-preserved teeth found in September 2016 near the German city of Eppelsheim are dated to about 9.7 million years ago. One of the teeth, the upper right first molar, is similar in characteristics to other specimens found in this area, but the other tooth, the upper left canine, is different. Researchers say that its outline and shape make it closer to the teeth of hominin species, including Australopithecus afarensis. The problem is that Lucy is estimated to be only 3 million years old, and it is believed that the earliest ancestors of humanity began their migration from Africa to Europe and Asia about 100,000 years ago. Thus, the question is who these teeth belong to, which ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time, and how they got there. They ruled even after death. The Incas had a unique attitude toward their deceased rulers, considering them not simply dead, but continuing to live and rule even after death. The mummy rulers were preserved and revered as if they were alive, possessing their own lands and wealth. Amazingly, the estates of such mummies continued to be managed by their servants, and the mummies themselves participated in important rituals and even meetings. It was believed that these rulers were able to give advice and influence the life of society, remaining the eternal masters of their lands. Over time, this created difficulties, as significant territories ended up under the control of the dead, which hindered the distribution of resources and the management of lands among the living. Such influence of the mummy rulers became a challenge for Inca society, especially under conditions of limited resources. The Incas tried to maintain a balance between honoring their ancestors and the needs of the living, which makes their culture unique and deeply symbolic. This phenomenon highlights how closely spiritual and practical life were intertwined among the Incas. One of the oldest books, the Codex Crosby-Shoyan, a rare manuscript that revolutionized the study of Christianity, was sold on June 11, 2024, at Christie's auction in London for almost $3.9 million. This codex, created in the mid-4th century in Egypt, contains biblical and other early Christian texts, making it unique for the study of the history of Christianity. The codex was found along with more than 20 other manuscripts near Dishna, Egypt, in 1952. These documents are known as the Bodmer Papyri, named after the Swiss collector Martin Bodmer. The codex includes 5 early Christian texts in the Coptic language, among which are the earliest known texts of the Book of Jonah and the first epistle of Peter. These texts are important for understanding early Christian literature and culture. The codex is an early example of the transition from scroll to book. The codex consists of 104 pages of papyrus, which were previously sewn together but are now kept under protective plexiglass. This transitional period is important for the history of writing and the book, as it demonstrates the evolution of writing technologies. The codex was copied by the same scribe, likely an Egyptian monk in the 3rd century AD. He used a freshly cut reed as a pen. The preservation of the codex is explained by the dry climate of Egypt, which allowed it to survive for more than 1,700 years. A black ring over Disneyland. Disneyland is the last place where you would expect to see something unexplainable. Everything around is designed to seem controlled, predictable, and fun. But one day, a perfect black ring hovered right above the park, smooth, dense, as if it had been cut out of the air. In the video, you can see hundreds of people looking up. Some think it's smoke, others think it's special effects. But the ring doesn't dissipate, drift, or rise upward. It just hangs in the sky, as if someone opened a thin black portal into the void. A perfect circle is the first odd thing. Smoke never behaves like that. Any cloud rising from pyrotechnics breaks apart, stretches, and gets torn by the wind within seconds. But here, it's perfect geometry, as if the shape is being held from within. The second odd thing is the silence. If this had been caused by a burst of fire, the sound would have carried throughout the area. But the cameras record absolute silence. People are shouting, talking, but the object itself doesn't make a single sound. The third point is duration. The ring lingers in the air too long to be smoke. It keeps the same thickness, doesn't tremble or move, and only after several minutes does it slowly dissolve, as if someone turned off the source. There have long been rumors about such an anomaly. Similar black rings have been seen over the fields of England, over the lakes of Canada, and over Indian cities. No one has ever explained their nature. The most popular theory is that it's not an object, but a plasma discharge, or a residual trace of some kind of technology, but no one can say what kind. Such rings often appear where there are a lot of people, places with large crowds, concerts, festivals, parks, as if whoever creates them wants the phenomenon to be seen or wants to study people's reactions. The official comment from Disneyland was brief. It was a pyrotechnic effect, but in the videos, there is no fire, no sparks, no flashes. This place was open twice. In the south of Cyprus, archaeologists discovered the remains of an ancient sanctuary, a small building, stone foundations, traces of cult activity, and it seemed like nothing unusual. Many such places are found, but this time there was one thing. It had already been discovered many years ago, and then forgotten again. The documentation about it was lost. It wasn't included on the map of active sites. There was no security, no signs, no excavations. And now it has been rediscovered and is being studied again. Inside there is an altar, remains of burnt offerings, fragments of figurines, all indicating a local cult, probably worship of a fertility goddess or a local spirit. Nothing grand, but everything is arranged very precisely and calmly. It's clear that the place was important. Objects over Yorkshire. In Yorkshire, people started taking pictures of strange dark ovals hanging low over the horizon. At first, everyone thought they were birds or drones until new footage appeared, taken by different people on different days, but with the same shape and the same stillness. Experts examined the photos. No wingspan, no propellers, no characteristic motion blur. The object was hanging in the air as if neither gravity nor wind affected it. In one of the photos, a faint glow could be seen along the outline. It wasn't bright, but it was even, as if the light was coming from within. Meteorologists ruled out atmospheric distortions. Aviation dismissed their aircraft. Astronomers ruled out satellites. Yet no explanation was found. For several weeks, The objects appeared almost on schedule, before sunset, along the same line of the horizon, and then suddenly disappeared. If it had happened only once, it would have been dismissed as a camera artifact. But the oval glowing shadows were recorded in Canada, the United States, and Eastern Europe. Similar shapes, similar behavior, motionlessness, smooth outlines, disappearances without a trace. It's as if someone is watching us. And what scares me the most is that people are talking about UFOs more and more these days. Artificial eye. Before you is the oldest known artificial eye in the world, which was found in the burial of a woman in the burned city of Shahr-e-Sukhteh in Iran. This unique artifact is more than 4,800 years old. The eye prosthesis was a hemisphere made from a lightweight material based on bitumen paste. It was covered with gold, and there were slits on its surface imitating a pupil, which gave it a realistic appearance. The prosthesis was secured with two small holes through which a cord, similar to modern bands, was threaded, allowing it to stay in place. The woman wore this eye during the day to conceal the empty eye socket, and at night she carefully stored it in a leather pouch that was found along with other burial items. The level of craftsmanship and attention to appearance amazes even modern researchers. This discovery testifies to the high level of medical and craft knowledge of ancient civilizations, as well as the people's desire at that time to preserve their appearance and maintain their dignity. Pair of suffering. Medieval interrogation rooms knew dozens of sophisticated instruments, but the pair of suffering remains a symbol of pure pain. Outside, it's a sleek metal fruit with an elegant handle. Inside, a screw mechanism spreads the petals. The executioner would insert the device into the victim's mouth, rectum, or vagina, and slowly turn the screw. The steel blades would open, tearing tissue and breaking the bones of the pelvis or jaw. The instrument didn't kill instantly. Its purpose was to force someone to talk or to humiliate. For heretics or witches, the pair was often heated over coals, so the metal would burn from the inside. The wounds almost always resulted in infection. Even if a person survived, gangrene would do its work. Today, these devices can be found in the dark displays of European museums. The maker's marks and serial numbers show that production was put on an assembly line, as if torture was just another craft industry, like making locks or kitchenware. The second object that appeared at the wrong time. While the whole world was discussing the interstellar object 3I Atlas, there was a barely noticeable news report about another body, C-2025, V1. At first glance, it seemed like an ordinary comet, but its behavior strangely matched the movement of Atlas, as if both objects were somehow connected. C-2025, V1 appeared too close in time, too conveniently in trajectory, and started changing its orbit at the exact moment when 3I Atlas was entering the inner solar system. Astronomers recorded a sudden increase in its brightness without any visible reason. Such surges typically occur with comets when the nucleus breaks apart, but in this case, the shape stayed stable and the brightness persisted for hours, as if the object was reflecting a signal. The strangest thing is its position. For several weeks, it was in a zone considered a blind sector. For most ground-based telescopes, this is a narrow area that's hard to observe because of the geometry of the Sun and Earth. On the movement diagrams of the two objects, it turned out that C-2025 V1 was not just moving parallel to Atlas, but was occupying a point between it and Earth, as if it was accompanying or tracking it. Officially, no one is talking about this, but reports from several observatories directly note that the object's dynamics make it difficult to build a model. For an ordinary comet, that's a rare way to put it, and unofficial comments have started to appear among observers. A possible probe that's moving ahead of Atlas, recording environmental parameters, gravity, and solar activity. Even if you dismiss ufology, the fact remains. Two rare objects entered the solar system almost simultaneously. One changes brightness without breaking apart. The other behaves as if it's slowing down in front of the moon. That's too many coincidences to ignore. If Atlas really isn't a coincidence, then C-2022 E5-61 looks like its scout. The land of princes. Archaeologists from the University of Bologna have discovered a new amazing tomb in the Corinaldo necropolis, Ancona Province, Italy. The archaeologist's excavation revealed a rectangular tomb in the center of a large circular pit. The tomb, measuring 3.8 by 2.2 meters, contained more than 150 decorated artifacts, including a two-wheeled chariot, a bronze helmet, cauldrons, and beautifully decorated vessels. These items indicate the presence of a funerary feast, which suggests the high status of the buried individual. The burial dates back to the 7th century before Christ and is associated with the Piscenes, an ancient Italic people who lived along the Adriatic coast from the 9th to the 3rd century before Christ. The Piscenes were known for their trade connections with neighboring cultures, including the Etruscans, as evidenced by the Etruscan artifacts that have been found. Recent discoveries include a large circular ditch 30 meters in diameter with a rectangular tomb. Among the artifacts are spindle whorls, an iron meat axe, and various ceramic serving vessels, indicating a funerary feast. This highlights the high social status of the person buried there. Mayor Gianni Aloisi of Coronaldo stated that the city can now be called the Land of Princes, confirming the historical and cultural value of the Nivola archaeological site. A wooden well from the Bronze Age? Archaeologists recently discovered a well-preserved wooden well from the Bronze Age in Oxfordshire, England. The well was found during the construction of the Benson Relief Road. John Butroyd, the senior project manager, said that they expected to find an ordinary pit, but instead came across a preserved wooden post driven vertically into the ground. Further excavation showed that the posts were part of a wooden well. The damp soil contributed to the excellent preservation of the wood. The archaeologists documented the structure digitally and carefully dismantled it for transport to the Oxfordshire Museum Service. Wood samples were sent for analysis to determine their type. In addition to the well, the archaeologists found flint, animal bones, and fragments of pottery, indicating their use for storage and waste. Despite the challenging conditions, the team successfully documented the well. Soil samples will help create a more complete picture of the surrounding landscape and the scale of the settlement. The codex that saw the future. In the Dresden Museum, there is a 12th century Maya scroll that was long considered just a collection of incomprehensible symbols, until scientists realized it was an extremely precise ancient algorithm for predicting solar eclipses. The Maya used a cycle of 4 to 5 lunar months and marked 38 new moons in which the sun could disappear. But the genius was in something else. They regularly reset the calendar at 223 and 358 months, preventing errors from accumulating. That's how the table remained accurate for centuries. Modern astrophysicists tested the model, comparing the codex with 145 actual eclipses observed by the Maya. Everything matched. Moreover, this method can still be used today by simply continuing their calculations. For the Maya, an eclipse was a sign from the gods. The calculations are pure mathematics, done without telescopes or instruments, just observation and memory. And now it becomes obvious. The Dresden Codex is not just an ancient relic, but proof that humans are capable of understanding the rhythms of the universe, even without technology. Ancient Roman chest safe. In 1994 in central Spain, near the ancient Roman temple of Mithras, archaeologists found the ruins of the Villa Casa del Mitreo. Built at the end of the 1st century, it was rebuilt several times until a major fire in the 4th century. Special attention was drawn to a large wooden chest, reinforced with copper and iron plates. In ancient Rome, such chests served as safes for storing valuables. The chest measures about 3 by 1.5 meters, making it the largest find of its kind. Due to the poor condition of the chest, which was damaged in a fire, archaeologists in 1994 did not dare to extract it, fearing it would be destroyed. The chest was left in place, awaiting better times and technologies for its preservation. This is a common practice in archaeology when the safety of an artifact cannot be guaranteed. In 2017, thanks to new technologies, the chest was extracted and delivered to the Spanish Institute of Cultural Heritage. There, it was stabilized and preserved. There is no information about the contents of the chest. Most likely, the owners saved their valuables before the villa was destroyed. The grim history of the ancient columns. Sweden is a harsh country, and even against that background, there are especially mesmerizingly grim places. One of them is a trio of stone pillars on Gallow Hill in the nature reserve north of Visby. This place claims to be the only surviving medieval execution site in Europe. The Gallow Hill Gallows, located on top of a small hill in the municipality of Visby, is a creepy but historically important place, one of the few that have survived since the Middle Ages. Built in the 13th century, it was used for executing local criminals. Tall stone pillars, surrounded by a low stone wall, supported wooden beams on which the condemned were hung by ropes or hooks. The gallows was visible from the sea, serving as a warning about the harsh consequences that awaited criminals. During archaeological excavations near the gallows, the bodies of about 300 people were discovered. All of them had been executed. Some of the bodies were found in wooden coffins, which was a luxury and indicated that these people belonged to the upper class. This shows that not only robbers and poor people were executed here, but also members of the elite. The samurai treasure. Not far from Tokyo, the largest hoard of antique coins in Japan's history was discovered. The treasure is kept in a huge clay pot, which is now on display in Kumagaya, in the cultural treasury of Saitama Prefecture, that is, in the National Museum. The historical hoard of bronze coins not only reveals new historical data, but also serves as evidence of the natural chemical processes of time. The copper in their bronze alloy has oxidized over the past 400 years. As a result, the coins have acquired a bright green hue due to a patina similar to the one that covers the Statue of Liberty. A clay pot filled with coins, more than half a meter wide, was probably buried hundreds of years ago. Archaeologists discovered it last year at the ruins that were once the site of the medieval pavilion of samurai. The coins date back to the 15th century, the era of the Ming Dynasty in China. Coins from the Tang Dynasty, the 7th century, were also found at the same excavation site. They are associated with Chinese dynasties because Japan was one of the last great civilizations to adopt its own coinage system. The coins were strung together on cords passing through holes, and each cord contained 1,000 coins. The standard of that time was one cord of 1,000 bronze coins equal to 1 ounce of silver. This knowledge about the historical period allowed archaeologists to estimate the number of coins without removing them from the giant pot. The number 260 was engraved on its lid. This hoard of coins represented a huge fortune in Japan of the 15th and 16th centuries. With this money, you could buy enough rice to feed 500 people for a year. The Cave of the Beer Quarry. This Roman quarry was once a hideout for smugglers, and now rare species of bats live here. The beer stone quarried here was an important building material as far back as the Roman era. 2,000 years of quarrying created a winding system of caves near the village of Beer, which gave the stone its name. The first Romans arriving in Devon noticed the limestone cliffs at the mouth of the River Exe. They discovered veins of fine-grained limestone and began to quarry it. When the surface deposits ran out, the Romans dug deeper into the rocks, extracting the stone with pickaxes and wooden wedges. This stone was used for the construction of important public buildings. The stone was transported to the river and sent away by boat. After the Romans left, the quarries were used by the Saxons. Their workings were characterized by sharp square corners, unlike the Romans' rounded ones. Beer stone was easy to work with, but it hardened in the open air, becoming stronger. It was cut on site and used to build such buildings as Windsor Castle, London Bridge, and Westminster Abbey. The stone was also used in the construction of Christ Church Cathedral in St. Louis, United States of America. After the Protestant Reformation, Catholics held secret masses in these caves. In the early 19th century, smugglers, including Jack Rattenbury, used the caves to hide contraband from sea vessels. Stone quarrying stopped in the early 20th century when a new site was discovered. Now these caves are of special scientific interest because of rare bats. Collision at altitude. The Boeing 737 MAX was flying at 9,000 meters. That's where there are no birds, no drones, and no weather anomalies. And suddenly something hit the side of the fuselage. It was sharp and without warning, as if someone had jabbed the plane at a speed no known object could reach. After landing, the technicians found a perfectly round dent. Not a scratch, not a trace of ice, just a smooth geometry, like the imprint of a tool. No fragments, no particles, no material that could help identify what it was. The object didn't break up or leave traces. It just passed by. Radars detected nothing. The military ruled out their craft and no satellites were on that route. And yet the impact is a fact. The instruments recorded it. The crew heard it. And the metal remembered it. Such collisions are rarely discussed publicly, but this case made it into the media. Contact with an unidentified object. No one has explained what exactly collided with the plane at an altitude of 9 kilometers to this day. An extremely rare discovery. A rare mastodon tusk was found in Florida, which became a real sensation. 29-year-old Alec Lundberg, while diving with his friend near Venice Beach, stumbled upon this unique artifact. Usually only prehistoric shark teeth and fragments of mammoth tusks are found in this area, which makes Lundberg's discovery especially valuable. Experts from the Bishop Museum of Science and Nature in Bradenton confirmed the authenticity of the tusk, noting it as extremely rare. Lundberg still has to notify the Florida Museum of Natural History to assess the scientific significance of the find. Mastodon tusks are usually only a few inches long and sell for $20 to $350, but Lundberg's discovery could be worth around $5,000. Interestingly, the tusk did not fall apart when it was lifted from the seafloor. Mastodons, which lived 5.4 million years ago and became extinct about 10,000 years ago, were relatives of modern elephants. Their fossils are usually found in Pliocene and Pleistocene deposits. Interestingly, mastodon fossils, including tusks, bones, and skulls, are usually found in only 4 American states: Indiana, Colorado, California, and New York. Therefore, the discovery in Florida is a rare and significant find. Leather shoes from the tomb. Chinese archaeologists are restoring 1,400-year-old leather shoes found in the Astana tombs, the capital of the ancient kingdom of Gaocheng. German experts are helping with the restoration. Finding such old leather or textiles is rare, as they quickly decompose when exposed to air. The shoes, taken from the archive of items excavated since the 1950s, are 24 centimeters long and consist of upper, shaft, and sole parts, sewn together from goat leather with animal sinew. Archaeologists have been studying the tombs for over a century. Since the 1950s, 456 tombs have been examined in 14 excavations, which have yielded about 10,000 valuable relics. The hot and dry climate has preserved many items that would have otherwise been destroyed, including 300 leather artifacts. Ancient shoes have also been found at other archaeological sites around the world. For example, hundreds of shoes or moccasins were found in a cave in Utah, which was inhabited about 850 years ago. On the shore of the Great Salt Lake, 207 moccasins made from animal hides were discovered, most of them children's. The soles of the shoes were made from a single piece of bison leather, lined with fur and sewn at the heel, which is characteristic of the Canadian subarctic style. The presence of so many children's shoes indicates a thriving population, despite people leaving the region due to drought. These shoes were made by the promontory culture. In May 2014, the oldest pair of pants in the world was discovered in China. Archaeologists found the remains of 2 nomads and 3,000-year-old patterned pants in western China. This confirms the theory that the transition from tunics to pants was a practical solution for horse riders. It's impossible to say exactly when people started making clothes because fabrics decompose quickly, but estimates range from 100 to 500,000 years ago. The first clothes were made from hides, fur, grass, leaves, bones, and shells. The oldest dyed fibers were found in a cave in Georgia. They are 36,000 years old. The Chinese tried an ancient drink. In an ancient tomb in China's Shanxi province, a tightly sealed bronze vessel was found. Researchers found about 300 milliliters of liquid inside, which turned out to be the remains of a fermented alcoholic drink about 2,300 years old. 2 people who tasted this liquid noted its metallic flavor. People learned to make fermented drinks back in ancient times. The earliest evidence of this was found in the Rakafet cave in Israel, where about 13,000 years ago, people made beer from grains. In the Neolithic era, alcoholic beverages began to be produced in the Middle East and China, using millet and rice. In a bronze vessel 30.5 centimeters tall and 21.5 centimeters in diameter, they found 300 milliliters of a clear liquid, or more precisely, a fermented alcoholic beverage that was used as a burial offering. Researchers found starch granules of 4 types in the liquid: millet, foxtail millet, Job's tears, legumes, wheat, barley, and rice. In addition, they identified organisms involved in fermentation, including mold fungi of the Aspergillus genus and baker's yeast. According to the scientists, the drink resembled modern yellow wine, huangju. Stoneberries? In the desert in the southwest of the United States, strange round stones were found, like stoneberries scattered on the sand. At first, they were thought to be weathered fragments of rock, until it turned out that similar structures appear in the legends of the Hopi people about heavenly seeds, and the same formations exist on Mars. The shape is perfectly spherical or slightly elongated, and the surface is smooth, as if polished. Geologists call them concretions, but usually such stones form in layers, pressed by rocks. Here, however, they lay freely, as if someone had poured them out of a bag. The strangest thing is the chemical composition. Inside, there are iron-rich layers that are very similar to Martian blueberries, spheres found in exactly the same groups on Mars by the Opportunity rover. The set of elements is almost identical. The Hopi call these berries the traces of the teachers who came from the red star. The scientific explanations are simpler: a rare form of mineralization, long-term wind erosion. But then it's unclear why the structures are the same in different countries, and why some of the berries seem to be scorched by high temperatures that have never occurred in these places. For archaeologists, it's a puzzle. Is it an artifact, a mineral, or a trace of events that we can't describe yet? But the fact remains: such forms are found both on Earth and on Mars. And sometimes nature repeats itself with uncanny precision in places where it seems there are no conditions for that. Where did the storm go that raged for 350 years? Jupiter has always seemed like something eternal, a giant ocean of gas, bands of wind, and its main eye, the Great Red Spot, a storm larger than Earth, which spun for hundreds of years and was visible through telescopes since the time of Cassini. It was like a kind of cosmic beacon, a landmark that never changed. And now it's gone. When the data from James Webb and Juno matched, astronomers at first didn't believe it. The structure of the storm had really broken apart. What once looked like a giant crimson cyclone is now pale streaks and traces of turbulence, as if someone wiped the spot off the surface of the gas giant. The reasons are explained scientifically: changes in winds, chaotic interactions of atmospheric currents, and the depletion of the storm's internal resources. But even scientists admit that the speed at which an entire centuries-old vortex disappeared goes beyond the usual models. A storm that lasted for centuries simply vanished in a matter of months. No astronomer expected such a pace, and while reports talk about atmospheric dynamics, people are noticing something much simpler. Something in our system is changing too quickly. An aluminum wedge. The Ayuda aluminum wedge, also known as the Ayuda object, is one of the most mysterious and controversial discoveries of our time. According to various sources, it was discovered in 1973 in Romania on the bank of the Mureș River, under a layer of sand about 10 meters deep, next to the bones of a mastodon. The main reason for the conspiracy theories surrounding the Ayuda aluminum wedge is that it is made of aluminum, a material unknown to humanity until the 1800s, whereas it is believed that the wedge is about 10,000 years old. The composition of the wedge includes 89% aluminum, 6.2% copper, 1.8% zinc, and other elements. The production of aluminum requires a temperature of 1,000 degrees, and mass production only began in 1885. The wedge is covered with a thick layer of oxide, which is estimated to be 300 to 400 years old. After its discovery, the object was handed over to the Cluj-Napoca Archaeological Institute for research. However, the dating method is not specified. The basis for the theory of the wedge's extraterrestrial origin is its aluminum composition. Romanian ufologist Florin Gheorghiță and other researchers consider the wedge to be evidence of extraterrestrial activity in the past. However, there are also scientists who believe the find is a forgery, the purpose and origin of which remain unclear. Since 1995, the Ayud wedge has no longer been displayed publicly and is kept in an unknown location. although there are photographs confirming its existence. Ecomuseum Zone 21? In Cusco, there is a place that even archaeologists speak about with caution. Zone 21 is not a museum, but an area where everything is too technological for the Inca era. Stone platforms there are so smoothly crafted, it seems they were cut not with primitive tools, but with something perfectly precise. Nearby, there are blocks of strange shapes that don't resemble temples or utility buildings. The angles are too precise, the surfaces too smooth. There are marks that look like imprints from machines. Local legends call this area the place where the gods of light descended. And the strangest thing is that right above these slabs, flashes of light are regularly recorded. Thin vertical beams appear for a couple of seconds. Drones detect spikes in the magnetic field, and compasses go haywire there, as if something is hidden beneath the stone. Scientists call all this unexplored geological features, but they admit themselves. Zone 21 stands out too much from the context. It's too even, too precise, too much like traces of those who knew how to work stone differently than people in the 13th century. An ancient tomb. In the shadow of the blue doors of the ancient Ming Dynasty tomb in China, a mystery of the ages was hidden. When they opened the gates, the archaeologists encountered an unusually luxurious tomb that was 400 years old. The tomb, discovered during preparations for highway construction in Shanxi province, is impressive for its preservation and refined craftsmanship. Researchers confirmed that the tomb, dated to the Ming Dynasty, belonged to nobility. Two luxurious wooden coffins with exquisite patterns and porcelain vessels indicate the high status of the deceased. The epitaphs hint at noble origins, and the magnificently decorated chests suggest a connection to the royal court. Among the finds are furniture, writing instruments, and works of art, highlighting the refined lifestyle of the elite of that era. Despite numerous hypotheses, the exact reason for such luxury and the purpose of the tomb remain unknown, adding mystery to the history of the Ming Dynasty, a period of flourishing culture, art, and science in China. The contact hinted at by Bush Sr. One phrase by George Bush Sr. has long become legendary. When he was asked about UFOs, he simply replied, "Some events of the 60s we will not explain." And almost everyone remembered one incident in New Mexico, 1964. Patrolman Lonnie Zamora saw a flash near a hill and thought it was an accident. But at the scene, he came across a metallic oval object on 4 legs and 2 small figures in white coveralls, shorter than a human. Their movements were quick, like technicians doing their job. Zamora came closer and the object roared, rose vertically, and disappeared. On the ground, there were prints from the supports, melted sand, and traces of heat exposure that did not match any known technology. An hour later, the area was cordoned off by the FBI, Air Force, and CIA personnel. Reports were collected, analyses were conducted, and everything was instantly classified. No attempts to ridicule the witness, no fireballs or weather balloons, just silence. And when, years later, Bush hinted at events that were too early to discuss, it became clear to many that he was talking about this very encounter, one of the most well-documented cases of an unknown object landing. Mysterious stumps on the seashore. The purpose of the mysterious Bronze Age structure known as Seahenge has puzzled archaeologists ever since its discovery in 1999 on a beach in Norfolk, England. However, recently scientists seem to have unraveled its mystery. Seahenge, or Holmruhr, is an upside-down oak stump surrounded by 55 split trunks. It was built in late spring of 2049 before Christ on a salt marsh protected by dunes and muddy shoals. Amateur archaeologist John Lorimer discovered the monument when he noticed the tip of a bronze axe in the sand. He started digging and found a stump with a ritual ring around it. The discovery sparked fierce protests from local residents, but the archaeologists took Holm Odin to the Lynn Museum, where its parts were preserved with wax. Holm Diva, found nearby and left in place, has been almost completely destroyed by the tides. Archaeologists believe that these structures were built to control the weather. At that time, the climate was harsh, with frosty winters and late springs, which had a strong impact on agriculture. The logs of shikingi were cut down in the spring and arranged to align with the sunrise on the day of the summer solstice. This is connected to the belief that the cuckoo, symbolizing fertility, returns to the other world and takes summer with it. The cuckoo ritual involves catching it in order to prolong the summer. In the center of Hill 2, sacrifices were made to Venus, which, according to beliefs, helped agriculture. These rituals were performed every 8 years, in accordance with the Venus cycle. Thus, both monuments sought in different ways to put an end to the harsh cold. The oldest known human viruses. Researchers from the Federal University of São Paulo discovered the oldest viruses in the bones of Neanderthals, which are over 50,000 years old. 2 Neanderthals, whose remains were found in a cave in Russia, underwent DNA testing. The results showed traces of the human papillomavirus, which is sexually transmitted, and adenovirus, which causes the common cold, as well as other viruses. Both Neanderthals were male. Experts have long suspected that viruses could have contributed to the extinction of Neanderthals. This discovery may confirm that theory. The study suggests that Neanderthals may have been infected with the same viruses as modern humans. It has also been proven that fragments of viral genomes can be identified in archaeological samples. Adenoviruses can cause various diseases, ranging from the common cold to acute gastroenteritis. Papillomaviruses are known for their association with cervical cancer. The team that made this discovery plans to synthesize these viruses from Jurassic Park to compare them with modern counterparts. The remains were found in the Chagirskaya cave in the Altai Mountains in Siberia. They belonged to a group of 9 people found in 2022 who were relatives. Researchers were able to sequence the Neanderthal genome and found that the viral traces did not get into the remains from animals or modern humans. Archaeologists emphasize that viruses were not the only reason for the extinction of Neanderthals, but they could have played a role in this process. The ghost forest in Transylvania. There is a place in Transylvania that is called the Bermuda Triangle of Europe. Hoia Baciu is a small forest area where people disappear, glowing orbs are seen, and photos show things that weren't there in reality. Locals have long viewed this area as a gateway between worlds, and growing evidence makes their claims harder to dismiss. The forest entrance appears normal, but after a few dozen steps, the trees' trunks twist into spirals, and their crowns bend into arches, as if pulled in different directions. Geologists haven't found any signs of strong winds or soil deformation, as if the plants themselves grew in a distorted space. Magnetic instruments go haywire here, the compass needle turns 180 degrees, and phones lose signal even with full coverage. But the main thing is the light phenomena. At night, perfectly round spheres, up to a meter wide, appear over the clearing. They move in ways that neither fire nor drones nor atmospheric plasma can, hovering in place, suddenly changing direction, and disappearing without a trace. On thermal imagers, they appear cold, meaning they are not flames or hot air. Scientists tried to explain this as electrical discharges, but discharges don't hang in the air for 10 seconds. In recent years, other things have been recorded in the forest as well. Shadows moving against the direction of the light, figures without any heat source. Strangely, people appear in photographs who weren't actually present. Tourists photograph an empty trail, yet a silhouette appears in the photos, sometimes blurry, sometimes clear, but never showing a living person. Hoia Baciu doesn't look like a mystical place. It looks like an area where something disrupts the usual laws of physics. And while this used to be considered a legend, today this part of Europe is officially included in the list of anomalous zones where unexplained light objects are recorded. Some people believe that there's an old corridor here, a place where lights have descended more than once. Lights that in other countries would be called UFOs. Golden tongues and images of gods. Archaeologists from the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities discovered an amazing collection of artifacts during excavations at Tel El Dir. This site has enriched the history of Egypt with 63 mud brick tombs and other simple burials. The team discovered numerous artifacts, including items made of gold foil depicting gods such as Isis, Bastet, and Horus, as well as protective symbols and tongues that allowed the deceased to speak before the judgment of Osiris in the afterlife. These foil fragments stand out for their craftsmanship and variety of materials. Numerous burial gifts were also found: amulets, statuettes, ushabti, figurines, coins, and mirrors, which illustrate the burial customs of the 26th dynasty. Among the finds was a ceramic vessel containing 38 bronze coins from the Ptolemaic era, depicting the head of Zeus Ammon. These coins, dated to the end of the 3rd century before Christ may have been buried during a major uprising against the Ptolemaic dynasty around 206 before Christ. The United States and Russia suddenly remembered nuclear testing. In recent years, the world reassured itself that the era of nuclear tests was over, but the situation has changed dramatically. The United States officially announced its readiness to conduct a rapid subcritical experiment in Nevada, and Russia almost simultaneously stated that it could resume tests on Novaya Zemlya for the first time in decades. Formally, these are studies on the safety of warheads and the modernization of the arsenal, but experts have noticed that preparations are proceeding unusually quickly and are carefully concealed under technical reports. Something else has also come to light. Satellite images show activity in areas usually untouched unless for serious reasons. In the United States, several underground tunnels have been cleared, and in Russia, they have started modernizing old observation posts where they used to monitor air shock waves. There are no direct explanations for this, no conflict, no arms race at a level that would require actual tests. A theory has emerged that governments are preparing systems capable of operating in space, from intercepting objects to testing the resilience of satellites against extreme electromagnetic bursts. And although these are officially called technical measures, the simultaneous activity of 2 nuclear powers has made many people wonder if the reason might be external rather than political. The military likes to speak vaguely, but even they rarely synchronize such programs without a serious reason. For the average person, all of this looks alarming. The 2 largest countries are suddenly acting as if something is happening beyond the atmosphere that is better to check in advance. There are no official explanations, but the fact that nuclear test sites, which have been inactive for decades, are coming back to life already raises questions on its own. The further they look, the fewer coincidences remain. Maybe the answers have been nearby all this time. Thank you for watching this video until the end. Goodbye, everyone.